Hi, I'm Sam Brebner, the New Zealand coordinator for Real Talk. We're an organisation that speaks to tens of thousands of young people in schools across New Zealand and Australia every year on the topics of sex, relationships and personal identity. Our workshop today is dealing with youth struggles, sexual culture. And I want to start by asking you a question. Where are young people getting their education about body image, sex and relationships? I ask this question to hundreds of parents, teachers and youth ministers every year, and the answers I get are always the same. I hear things like from TV, from social media, from Netflix, from magazines, from their friends, and less commonly from their families, from their schools. But if these were the answers that you were thinking of, you're on the right track. The research would show that the number one educator on these topics is the media. One piece of research found that young teens, those aged 13 to 15 years old, ranked entertainment media as the top source of information about sexuality and sexual health. Now, unfortunately, another main educator on these topics is pornography. One national survey of New Zealand youth found that porn is increasingly the default tool for learning about sex ed. I'm not going to go into this topic too much more because our managing director, Paul Ninnis, is doing an entire workshop on the topic of pornography, but I'd really encourage you to check it out. The reality is that we cannot talk about young people and sexual culture while ignoring the topic of pornography. It is such a big part of this. But pornography aside, in the media alone, teens are exposed to over 15,000 sexual references and innuendos every year. And to give you a better idea of the types of things our young people are facing every day, I want to show you a few examples. So here we've got a couple of shots from Instagram. This second one came up when I typed in hashtag couple goals. We've got Kim Kardashian here, obviously very big on social media, Instagram in particular. We've got YouTube, one weird dating trick that will change your life. Lauren Simpson on Facebook, the world bikini champion. TV shows like Love Island, when we ask young people how many of them are fans of these, when we're presenting, we get a lot of hands up. Cosmopolitan magazine, 21 mind-blowing sex moves. Also TikTok, very much becoming a big one at the moment. We've got ads. This one here is from Gucci. This one here from Dolce & Gabbana. I want you to look closely at this one and see if you can tell me what you think this is advertising. No, it's not jeans, it's not body oil, it's not a fragrance. Believe it or not, this ad is advertising sunglasses. There's only one guy wearing sunglasses in this image and he is the one holding the woman down. Fortunately, this ad was actually pulled soon after it was created because of the uproar caused by the image. Netflix is another big one, shows like Sex Education and a whole bunch of other shows as well. Riverdale, 13 Reasons Why, You, Me, Her, all shows where we are seeing a lot of sexually explicit content and messages are coming through on these topics. Maybe not in an explicit way, but just through the way that the characters live their lives and the behaviors that they demonstrate. So this is the type of thing that young people are seeing every time they turn on the TV or are scrolling through their Instagram feed. But what impact do all of these messages actually have on young people? Well, this is actually a question that we at Real Talk ask the young people themselves. We ask this question to thousands of youth and we get the same answers again and again and again. On the topic of body image, young people tell us that they feel enormous pressure to look a certain way. For girls, that's often having that hourglass figure of bigger breasts and bigger buttocks, but a very skinny waist, that kind of Kim Kardashian figure. For guys, they tell us there's a lot of pressure to be ripped, to have big biceps and the six-pack abs. And young people feel like this is how they need to look. If they're going to be attractive, if they're going to be happy, this is the way that they need to be. And in our culture, we're seeing the effects of this. Eating disorders have grown by 400% since 1970. On the topic of relationships, young people see relationships portrayed in one of two different ways. The first way is the hashtag relationships goals images that they see in places like Instagram. They see couples having a lot of fun, living a carefree lifestyle, and having relationships that seem to just be filled with endless happiness and joy. They don't see any conflict, they don't see any troubles. The other picture they get of relationships is the reality TV version of relationships. These are the opposite, relationships filled with drama, with fights and arguments, and even with cheating and infidelity. What young people don't see are ordinary relationships. Relationships somewhere in between that are filled with happiness but also have conflict and these challenges. They're not getting role models of what a healthy, real relationship should look like. And on the topic of sex, the messages that young people tell us that they're getting is that sex is casual, that sex is just a given in a relationship, and that sex isn't a big deal. Or rather, that it means whatever you want it to mean. If you want sex to be a really special thing that you share with just one person or in a committed relationship, then great. But if you don't, if you want it to just be a casual thing that you share with someone as part of a one-night stand, something that you share with lots of different sexual partners, that's totally fine as well. Sex can mean whatever you want it to mean. But I think in terms of the impact that this has on young people, what they tell us is that they just feel a lot of pressure. That there's an expectation that if they're in a relationship, that is going to be a sexually active relationship, but also that they need to have sex. Particularly by the time that they finish high school, that they would have lost their virginity, or there's something wrong with them. They're doing relationships and they're doing life wrong. These are the realities of the sexual culture that our young people are living in every day. So how do we equip them to navigate that culture, but also hopefully to push back against it? Well, I want to share with you what I'm going to call the 3 Ps. And the first P is promote critical thinking. The day-to-day reality is that young people are getting bombarded with dozens, if not hundreds, of sexual references through the media that they consume. So we need to equip them to deal with all of these messages and images that they're seeing. The reality is that even if you give one fantastic talk at your youth group or at a youth event about relationships, about sex, about all of these topics, that one fantastic talk is going to get drowned out pretty quickly by all of the noise of these messages. So what we want to do is we want to form and equip young people so that they are thinking critically about these things that they are seeing themselves. When they're looking at advertising, and advertising is using either men or women's bodies to sell, we want them to be having that thought, why is this woman in a bikini needed to sell me a burger? Isn't that a pretty sad reality? When they're scrolling through Instagram, we want them to be thinking to themselves, that the reality of social media is that this is where people post the best, but leave out the rest. That what we're seeing isn't necessarily the truth of a relationship, or it's not the full truth of a relationship. It's leaving out the more challenging and day-to-day and even boring aspects of what makes a relationship what it is. But we also want to cultivate that awareness that not just in magazines, not just in advertising, but also increasingly on social media as well, a lot of what we see isn't the truth. A lot of what we see is not only filtered but is digitally altered in some way, and it doesn't present to us a real picture of people, of people's bodies, or their relationships. And finally, we want to encourage our young people as they're consuming this media and getting into certain habits of using different social media platforms, watching different TV shows, to always be asking themselves that question, is this healthy for me? Is this the type of habit that I want in my life if I'm going to be the best person that I can be? We want to encourage them to ask that question when they log off from social media at the end of a scrolling session. How are they feeling? Are they feeling better, or are they actually feeling more self-conscious? Are they feeling more anxious? How are these habits affecting them in their day-to-day life? And how can they process that? If they know that a certain TV show or a certain social media account they follow is affecting them in this particular way, what are some positive and proactive ways that they can respond? So how do we promote critical thinking with our young people? Well, one way you could do it would be to intentionally have a youth night or an event with the goal of talking about the media and critical thinking. You could show your youth examples like the examples that I put up just before and ask them, what messages do we get about body image, about love, relationships, and sex from these different forms of media? What we find at Real Talk over and over again is that young people get this, and when they identify the negative and often conflicting messages that they're getting from these different places, they actually get really fired up about it. They get really passionate. But another really easy way to promote critical thinking is to use everyday teaching opportunities. If there is a billboard in your city or a particular ad that's getting a lot of attention, talk about it. Talk about it at youth group when you're around your young people. It doesn't have to be a formal thing or something that you make a big deal of, but it's just something that you can address. What we're finding at Real Talk at the moment is we're talking a lot more about TikTok. This is a form of social media that's very popular, and quite often with young people, we're encouraging them to take a critical look at their TikTok use, to take a critical look at some of the dances that are quite popular and how sexualized some of those are, but also the songs that are trending and going viral, and often how sexualized the lyrics of those songs are. By using everyday examples that are playing out in the lives of your young people, not only are you going to be a lot more relevant, but hopefully you're going to build the habit of these teens doing this themselves as they're scrolling through social media. The second P is to present a positive alternative. It's important that we recognize that in the majority of the homes that our young people have come from, the topics of sex and relationships haven't been well covered. Often sex is presented in a way where sex is bad, sex is dirty, or it just doesn't get addressed at all. What we need to do is present a positive vision, a positive alternative. For me, this was the game changer in my own life and in my perception of the Catholic teaching around sex. When I was in high school, I had a chaplain who was really open and honest about these topics, and he was someone that I knew that I could go and talk to. So one lunchtime, I went up to him and I started asking a lot of the questions that any young guy or girl has. Why do Catholics believe that sex is something that belongs in marriage? And even if someone believes that, what does that mean in their relationships? What's the deal with physical boundaries? How far is too far? A lot of these common questions. And I'll never forget one thing that he said to me that completely changed my perception of these topics. He said, "Sam, I think so often when people hear what the Catholic Church teaches about love, sex, and relationships, they can think that it sounds like a lot of no, no, no. Like, can I do this in a relationship? No. Well, can I do this with my girlfriend? No. What about this? Can we do this? No. No, no, no." But he said, "Sam, I think the thing that so many people don't understand is that it's actually about saying yes. It's about saying yes to relationships that are based on authentic love. It's about saying yes to relationships where what you're doing with your body, the love and commitment that you're expressing, lines up with the status of the relationship that you're in. It's about saying yes to relationships where physical intimacy is a way of communicating your love for each other. It's not something that has pressures attached to it. It's not something that's based on selfishness." And the minute he said that, my point of view changed. And I knew that I wanted to say that yes in my own life. So, as youth ministers, as people speaking into these topics, we need to focus on the positive. Sex isn't bad or dirty. It's good, it's beautiful, and it's an incredibly positive thing. It's the most powerful way that one person can express their love and commitment for another person. But that's why the Catholic Church believes that it belongs in marriage. Not because it's a negative or bad thing, but because it is such a special and sacred and positive thing. For us at Real Talk, a lot of how we talk about these topics is grounded in St. Pope John Paul II's theology of the body. The fundamental ideas that come through time and time again is that we have been created for love. Our bodies are good, and what we do with our bodies, especially in the context of sexual intimacy, has incredible meaning. In this short talk, I don't have time to go into theology of the body, but I want to encourage you, look into and educate yourself more on this incredible resource. The third and final P is personal sharing. This is a cornerstone for us at Real Talk. Everything that we talk about, we try to tie in to our own personal experience. So when I'm talking with young people about the meaning of physical and sexual intimacy, I do that by sharing part of my own story. A story that I often share as part of a Real Talk presentation is my first kiss. I talk to young people about going to a high school where I felt a lot of pressure from my friends to get into a relationship and to hook up with a girl, to start getting physical with her. And I talk to them about how I gave into that pressure, how I started dating a girl that I wasn't even that romantically interested in, and our relationship started to get physical quite quickly because I wanted to fit in with my mates. I heard that this is what I needed to do to fit in and have fun. So that's what I did. And I share with young people how I thought that making these choices was going to make me feel awesome. But instead it was the exact opposite. Instead, I ended up feeling pretty unhappy and pretty empty. And it's from there that I ask them, what is the meaning of a kiss? What are we saying with our bodies when we kiss someone? And it's interesting, I always get really good answers. I get answers like, a kiss means I like you, or I care about you, or maybe even I love you. And then I say to them, well, when I kissed that girl that I was in a relationship with, this is what I was saying with my body language. But do you think that that was lining up with what was going on in my head and in my heart? And you see the light bulb go on for them. You see them recognize that, here is a guy who has been using physical intimacy in this way that it wasn't created for. Instead of it being a way of expressing love, he's using it in a way that's selfish. And all of a sudden we've taken something that to a lot of young people might seem like a dry and dusty old teaching of the Catholic Church, and we've made it real. We've made it something that actually a lot of them can relate to. The reality is that if we're going to connect with young people on these topics of love, sex, and relationships, we can't just be theoretical. We've got to be real and we've got to be relatable. But I also want to share with you, in the Bible, in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 11, it says, we will conquer evil by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. I want to encourage you, youth ministers, don't be afraid to share your own story. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, because the Holy Spirit can work through your sharing. What we share with these young people can be the most valuable, the most powerful, and the most real way that we can connect with them on these topics. So personal sharing is a must. So that is about all that we have time for. The reality is that this is a really challenging culture for our young people to live in. They are absolutely bombarded with sexual innuendo, sexual references, and messages about the topic of sex, many of them unhealthy. It's hard to know how to respond to this and how we can help our young people to navigate through this sexual culture. But I want to finish with an encouragement, because the truth is that you can make a powerful difference. I'm here presenting this workshop today because of the work of a bold youth minister who was brave enough to address these topics in a real way and speak the truth. So remember the 3 Ps. 1, promote critical thinking. 2, present a positive alternative. And 3, personal sharing. Keep these in mind and keep doing everything you can to empower your young people to have lives and relationships filled with authentic love.